Climate Finance Access Hub. And we are honored to be joined by distinguished representative from the Pacific Community, SPC. SPC is here, thank you. Dr. Colin Young from the Caribbean Climate Change Community. He's here as well. And this both organization are regional accredited entity that have paved the way for leadership in climate finance. And we are also welcoming national institutions such as the Eswatini Environment Authority. We are here, thank you. And the Eswatini National Disaster Management Agency. Good, and this organization, I think, have aspiration to become accredited. Okay, and we are also excited to be joined by the Zambia National Commercial Bank, ZANACO, and they are here as well, which is also an accredited entity. So each of these organizations brings unique perspectives from their accreditation journey, and others bring their hopes for accreditation, but they all have the climate finance strategy, and we hope to discuss all of that this afternoon. We also joined by folks from the Commonwealth as well, and our very own Uzo Amuraka would be joining us as well to do some opening remarks. And I'm your humble servant, Martin Barreto, the Climate Finance Advisor for Grenada. Okay, today's session would focus on the very strategic levers for climate action, and that is accreditation to multilateral climate funds. And we know accreditation is not just a technical hurdle, it's a gateway to direct access in climate finance. It's institutional empowerment as well, and long-term sustainability. It enables national and regional entities to design and deliver climate solutions that are both locally grounded and globally aligned. But as well, accreditation is a complex journey. It demands robust fiduciary standard and oversight mechanisms. It demands environmental and social safeguard, gender integration, and sustained institutional commitment. I mean, having worked with accredited entity myself, which is the Antigua Environmental Organization, and I've also worked with organizations who worked with accredited entity like the like Tonga. So I worked with SPC as well, and now I'm working with Grenada, who is working with 5Cs. And what I know, the modus operandi of an accredited entity and an entity that is not accredited is totally different. You know, I could know in Antigua, when you go to the office on Saturdays, there is a number of folks still working there, and they could be up late at nights trying to make their submissions. And then there's all these oversight committees that go into meeting all late at nights. So and on the other end, you know, with Tonga or with Grenada, you know, we always after the accredited entity to find out, when are we hearing from the GCF, or they coming back to us to find out, oh, when are you providing the comments on your documents? So it's a total different. To me, it's like, you know, being in a car on a stable road when you're not accredited, and when you're accredited, is being in an airplane where there is turbulence and unevenness, and so it's totally different. So I think this afternoon we really want to hear the different perspectives. So, you know, we would share knowledge, experience, and experience from you know, the accreditation journey, including enabling factors and lessons learned from engaging with climate funds such as the Green Climate Fund and the Adaptation Fund. We also want to you know, share institutional experiences in addressing climate risk and building resilience across Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. And we also want to highlight scope benefits too from the integration approaches, whether it's from early warning system or nature-based solutions, ecosystem protection, and inclusive financing. So to get us going, you know, I would invite our colleague Uzo to come up and give some. All right, so we are changing. So we would invite our Senior Director, Suraj, to come up and give us some opening and welcome remarks. Thank you, Suraj.
Thank you, Martin, and I can hope that there is a jet lag, so we are here to discuss one of the very important element. And thank you, colleagues from SPC, 5C, Zambia, Eswatini for joining, and I really appreciate. Couple of thoughts I want to say. Most of the points have been covered by Martin, but just to say that accreditation is not only for the sake of accreditations to an institutions. How do we see it and how do we value it? It's a pathway. It's a pathway to achieve certain goals in your country journey, your institution journey, and as well as the entire ecosystem of the financing world. While doing the accreditation, you are already trying to identify the risk in your system, in your institutions, and you are already trying to find out the way to mitigations. So that is what the pathway you do when you do the accreditation process. Now the next question is that how do you make that the entire journey and pathway lead to monetization of revenue? That's the stage where you as an institution, as a country, you want to achieve. So accreditation is just the beginning of a journey. The other element is start to you is that how do you link up the strategic partnership around the world? You are just one element of this entire global ecosystems. So accelerators you need. You need the strategic pathways. You need the accelerators. What could be the accelerators? We have been talking about, we were in Sao Paulo, we were talking about the technologies, AI, digital solutions as an accelerators. So that you being even a small element in the entire universe of $110 trillion world GDP, even you may be half a billion, maybe 1 billion, how you can become a part of that $110 trillion and using the technology, AI as an accelerator and strategic partnership as enabler to see that you realize your vision of institution, your vision of as a country. And the Commonwealth, the Secretariat at the center of these processes is always willing to support you as a headquarter based in London and also through our strategically located climate finance advisor in many of the countries. And also, of course, we are partnering with the NDCs, we are partnering with the 5Cs and SPC to see that this ecosystem thrive. We are not talking about Commonwealth alone. We're talking about our regional partners. We're talking about our national partners to see that 1 + 1 makes 11, not only 2. So that's the mantra. That's the goal which we have under our the strategic leadership and the board leadership, our Secretary General, to see that we are able to derive maximum revenue, maximum benefit, maximum impact to our member countries. So thank you for joining this journey with us. I'm sure that this journey which we are planting together, which we are planning together, will be a very rewarding and fruitful journey for each one of us. Once again, thank you very much for joining, and over to my colleague Martin to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as we learned, accreditation is a journey. Some of us are on the just starting, some of us are more advanced, but today we're going to share experiences, you know, so we could all be on some advanced level on that journey. So the next, we would have a panel discussion, and the panel discussion will have each member on the panel deliberate on a specific question, and then we'll have a general question to everyone. So first, I would like you to join me inviting members of the panel up front. And first, we'll have Dr. Colin Young, who is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Climate Change Center, which is locally called 5Cs. And this is headquarters in Belize in the Caribbean, so we would get the Caribbean perspective. And Colin has been leading regional efforts to coordinate and advance climate resilience across the Caribbean member state. And before 5Cs, I think he's serving as the Executive Director for the last 5 years. But before that, he held a lot of senior and strategic positions in Belize Social Security Board, and then he was a senior leader in the Belize Ministry of the Environment, Energy, and Sustainable Development. He also sits on many climate boards before, including the Green Climate Fund. So join me in welcoming Dr. Colin Young to the panel. And next we'll have perspective from the Caribbean, and we'll invite Mrs. Coral Pasisi to join us at the front. She's the Director of the Climate Change and Sustainability with the Caribbean Pacific Community, locally called SPC. Sorry, the Pacific Community, SPC, sorry. So, Perspective from the Caribbean. And she has many years from the Pacific, sorry. And she has many years of experience in this Pacific region and in regional and international policy, multilateral agreements, and arrangement for sustainable development and climate financing. And let us welcome Mrs. Coral Pasisi. And next we'll invite Mr. Victor Maflalela, and who is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Disaster Management Agency in Eswatini. And he's a disaster risk reduction practitioner with broad international experience. He played a pivotal role in major responses program, like in Haiti, earthquake response in 2010 to 2012, in the Democratic Republic of Congo 2012, and in Eswatini. So join me in welcoming. And next we would invite to the panel Mr. Isaac Dadla, and who is the Chief Executive Officer, Eswatini Environmental Authority. And he's a leading expert in environmental management and climate change, and he brings many years of experience in EIAs, environmental auditing, strategic planning, and climate risk assessment. And lastly, but not least, we want to invite to the panel Mr. Charlie Fiyeni, and he's the Chief Commercial Officer at the Zambian National Commercial Bank. That's the ZANACO. And he's a leading financial strategist, and his experience spanned from entry-level roles to C-suite, with focusing on business strategy, personal development, and sustainable finance. Okay, folks, so that's our panel. And I will ask each person a specific question, and then I'll ask a general question. So we'll start with Mr. Colin Young, or Dr. Colin Young. And you know, the Caribbean faces intensified climate risk from hurricane to sea level. In fact, Hurricane Melissa, which just landed in Jamaica, was a Category 5. I think it was the first Category 5 that landed in the islands. And the 5Cs has been instrumental in supporting countries to access climate finance. What we want from you, what are the advantages as an accredited entity you could share in fostering collaboration across sectors such as disaster risk management, environment, and finance in the Caribbean? I mean, what lessons from your experience of accreditation processes could you share with other regions like the Pacific and the Caribbean? And lastly, what is your experience working with accessing climate finance with national entities in the Caribbean? So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Martin. And first, I want to thank the Commonwealth Secretariat for the invitation to be a part of this distinguished panel with my colleagues from the Pacific and from parts of Africa. The Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, known as 5Cs, is a regional institution that was set up by CARICOM heads of government in 2002 to coordinate the region's response to climate change. So we have 15 governments that form the CARICOM region. I see the African Union has 17. And the 5Cs is the technical secretariat that coordinates climate change on behalf of these 15 countries, much like SPC and SPREP that you do for the Pacific Island countries. 5Cs really provide three services, key services to our member states. First is we ensure that climate information and data are collected to influence in evidence-based decision making. Second, we actually help countries mobilize climate finance for climate resilient actions on the ground. We are an accredited entity to the Green Climate Fund. We're an accredited entity to the Adaptation Fund, and to other partners as well. And third, we actually help coordinate the Caribbean's negotiating positions here at the COP. So we bring climate change ministers and negotiators together twice per year leading up to the COP to ensure that CARICOM priority are among the 15 countries are clearly understood so that the negotiators can come here and advocate for CARICOM's priorities as part of AOSIS and then obviously as part of G77 and China. So quickly to get to the question, Martin, about the advantages as an accredited entity. So 5Cs has had some success in mobilizing climate finance for our countries. Since 2002, we've already mobilized and invested over 310 million US dollars across our states. And a significant portion of that has been since our accreditation to the Green Climate Fund in 2015. What we try to do as an accredited entity is that 5Cs does not pursue projects that are 5Cs projects. We pursue So all of the projects in our pipeline are multi-sector projects that touches key resilience areas. And our competitive advantage and comparative advantage in this space is in the food, energy, and water space. So all of the projects we designed for the Green Climate Fund, and we have about 140 million in GCF funding currently, that we're managing for projects in Barbados, for Belize, Dominica, and we have 30 readiness from the GCF that we've implemented over 14 countries in the region. So we have quite a bit of GCF experience. And just very quickly, we have a project in Barbados that is helping to build resilience of the Barbados water sector to the effects of climate change. Barbados is one of the most water scarce countries in the world. And so what we're doing is a couple of interventions. First is we're providing renewable energy to provide the power to pump water, pumping stations to provide electricity. So when a storm comes and knocks off the utility, water cannot get to houses, nor can it get to hospitals, nor to schools, nor to hurricane shelters. And so by building solar PV systems as a backup at the water pumping stations, when there is a shortage of electricity, that allows water to be pumped to critical infrastructure. We've also installed over 1,500 personal water tanks to 1,500 households, including all of the systems, the water treatment. We've also installed a 50,000-gallon water tank at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is the largest hospital in Barbados, so that it has 1 week's supply of water in the event that there's a hurricane. And we also designed an innovative fund where the selling of the energy into the grid from the solar PV stations capitalizes a fund that then can on-lend to single women and single women households and small businesses to implement water conservation measures. So this is one example of how we integrate disaster response and preparedness along with water and food security. We have another project that we're upgrading the water treatment plant from a secondary level to a tertiary level, and then pumping that water over a 9-kilometer pipeline to the agricultural portion of Barbados, where the farmers can use now this clean recycled water to water their crops without then depending on the aquifer to pump water. In the rainy season, we're drilling injection wells where the water can be replenished into the aquifers, and in the dry season, the farmers use the water. The energy that is coming to power the water treatment plant is coming from installing a 1 megawatt PV system, which is providing 66% of the energy needs for the plant. Again, you see the link between food, energy, and water. In Dominica, we just got a $27 million project approved from the GCF for Dominica about 2 weeks ago at the board at B43. That project is building the resilience of small-scale farmers to the effects of climate change. They're planting climate-resilient crops. It's building nurseries. It's building greenhouses. It's building, it's retrofitting schools using solar PV and installing early warning systems both at the village level as well as enhancing the national level. Again, a link with disaster preparedness. So those are some of the projects that we have worked with our countries to design, and we have been fortunate to be able to have now 4 funding proposals funded from the Green Climate Fund, and we have a pipeline of $500 million that we hope to deliver for 7 countries by the end of 2027. Again, all of these projects are very national priorities tied into their national climate change strategies. The other part of the accreditation process that was very useful for us is because we were already in the business of collecting and analyzing data. And we have a regional clearinghouse at the 5Cs, which is the largest repository of Caribbean-specific climate and information. And that data becomes very, very valuable when we design the climate rationale that is required by the Green Climate Fund to prove that the problem that you're trying to solve is in fact caused by climate change, and that the interventions that you're going to make are indexed to some future scenario of how the climate is going to change. So for example, just very quickly, if I'm going to ask the GCF for monies for a flooding resilience project, and I need to build drains, the question becomes, how wide should the drains be? How deep should the drains be? And we need now to know the rainfall, the historical rainfall but also future scenarios of rainfall. We know that with every 1 degree increase in ambient temperature, that air can hold 7% more moisture. So what you're seeing is we get this almost the same amount of rain sometimes, but the rain doesn't come spread out. It comes in very short periods of time with a tremendous amount of water. And our drains and systems are built for the old type of rainfall, not for the current and future types of rainfall. Lastly, the importance of strategic partnerships is really, really important. The 5Cs has strong partnerships with the academia, with civil society organizations, the Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, and there's a climate studies group at the University of the West Indies that does a lot of the climate modeling at very high resolution that helps us to, again, use an evidence-based approach in the designing of these programs. To get to the second part of the question, 5Cs was the first accredited entity in the Caribbean regional to the Green Climate Fund in 2015. And 5 years later, we undergone what is called a re-accreditation process. So we've gone through it twice. I have no here, that's one of the reasons why. It is literally a very, very difficult process for those of you who want to get accredited. But at the end of the day, it is actually, when you succeed, it enhances the stature of the organization that then allows you to crowd in a lot of other partners who want to work with you who otherwise would not have been at the table. So, for example, you have to have very strong fiduciary systems, whether that's your financial audits, having your financial manuals, your procurement manuals, your grievance redress mechanisms, very strong social safeguards, gender policies, as well as grievance redress mechanisms. If people want to complain, that there's a way to complain. AML and CFT is a key part. So when you do all of this fiduciary investment, then all of a sudden partners look at you and they know that you have the systems to be able to account for their resources. The other point I want to mention with this is that accreditation, and I think Suresh said that from the Commonwealth Secretariat, accreditation is only to be able to play the game. It's not a means it's not an end of itself, it's a means to an end. Countries, some institutions have taken 3, 5, 7 years to get accredited. And then after you get accredited, in some instances, it has taken 4, 5, 6, 7 years to get your first project. So you have to be very clear about what is it that you want with accreditation, and you have to ensure that there's leadership from your board, from the CEO, all the way through, that there's a focal person who is helping you to ensure that you can be responsive to all of the requests, and then that you also ensure that as you are progressing through the accreditation, the reason for it is very clear. Some people get into accreditation because they think they can make money, and that the money is the reason why you want to get accredited. But you will soon find that that is really not the case. If you think about it, if you take a $40 million project, the GCF allows you about 7% administrative fee to manage that project over 5 years, right? So if you have about $3 million divided by 5 years, and that it runs all of your costs. If there's any delays in the project, that cost is on you. The GCF doesn't give you additional resources. However, you get from the scale, as you crowd in other types of investments from other partners, then as a portfolio, you start to get the economies of scale that allows you now to at least to cover your costs so that you're not subsidizing the delivery of projects.
I think a lot of things will come up in the other.
Okay, so yeah. I will end there now then because I'm conscious of time. So you have to tell us when to.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. Let's give Colin a round of applause. And we learned that accreditation is a means to an end. It's not the end, because the work just starts with accreditation. So moving on, I would shift now to Zanaco, because I think our friend may have to leave. That Mr. Charlie Mafuyini. And your question is pioneering climate-aligned banking in Zambia. You are an accredited entity to the GCF and has partnered with the World Bank and the European Investment Bank. How was your experience with accreditation to the GCF? And what are some of the challenges that caused a time lag? We heard Colin talk a lot about time lag if you don't advance the hard work after, between approval and effectiveness of an institutional accreditation. How can financial institutions work closer with public agencies like Disaster and Environmental Authority to co-design impactful and fundable solutions?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll try not to be as long as Colin did, or as long as it took us to get accredited to the Green Climate Finance. So I come from a company that was solely formed for the sole purpose of developing or enhancing access to finance for our customers, and also contributing to economic development. Now, that means that we play in a lot of segments or customer segments, and the bulk of our customers are highly, highly impacted by climate change. So for us, the strategy to go the sustainability route was an easy decision to make. And of course, out of that, we needed to open direct access to funding, and getting accredited was one of the things that we did. So we took about 3 years to get accredited to the GCF. That was about 2023, and 2 years later, we haven't had any single concept not approved. But there's been some great lessons, one of which is obviously developing connections and networks. Example is sitting with these wonderful people here as one of the great lessons. The other one is that we got our staff trained, including our customers. Right now, we do run a sustainability symposium every year for our customers, because we noted that there was a gap in the market in as far as putting together concept notes was concerned, ensuring that you have a bankable proposal for your customers. So every year, we do attract players in the green climate finance space that come to speak to our customers, and we're seeing some traction there in as far as skills training is concerned. Now, some challenges that we faced. The first one was lack of an experience in running a green project. The assumption is that as you are applying for accreditation, you should have done the green project before. Now, what a commercial bank would experience is that we normally work through our customers, the scope 3. So through there, these are the entities that we want to help transition, and that's our contribution towards the transition. And then the assumption again for GCF is that we should be able to deploy our policies in the projects that we're expected to have run. But as you may know, you cannot force your own policy onto a third party. So that was one of the things that we needed to navigate. How do we ensure that we are demonstrating that we've got the experience, but that experience was done by a third party, and we could not use our own policies to be able to deploy in there. The other challenge we faced was the extent of the documentation, and I know Colin did mention a number of them. We needed to ensure that there are strategic documents that are shared, financial management documents, board charters, etc., etc. Some of these documents cannot just be shared. You need to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. But GCF does not sign that. So they will tell you, can you redact, cover any areas that are confidential, but some documents are confidential from the first page to the end. So we needed to navigate that, and it took a lot of time for us to be able to internally get clearance and be able to use those documents as it were with GCF. The other one was the gender policy. It's a very, very important part of the accreditation process. Now, when you look at it as well, the expectation is that when the GCF come into your space, they'll look at the adequacy of your policy. Is it adequate enough? But again, you will not prescribe that gender policy that you have as a commercial bank into a customer who you're going to give money to. So again, there was a mismatch, and that proved to be a challenge. So we needed to ensure that most of our customers became aligned. We changed our gender policies, and eventually, like I indicated, we got the accreditation. I will speak to the last part of the questions and very briefly, some of the things that we think you should be able to do from a strategic collaboration perspective, financial innovation perspective. One of the things that you need to be able to do is have joint planning and risk assessment. I think together with the key parties in the market, you collaborate through risk mapping, you will be able to form certain solutions that are going to work and create the impact or resilience that you need in the market. And through that, you will be able to have targeted investments that build resilience, be it infrastructure, etc., etc. Another one is co-designing of financial instruments. That will also help with this partnership that you need to have, and also ensuring that the products or solutions that you're going to take into the market are going to de-risk your investments. The third one is really about capacity building and technical assistance. And we've seen that through the journey that I prescribed. Technical assistance does help. We recently approved a $100 million project, solar project, using our own balance sheet. So we didn't wait for GCF, but through the technical assistance and the skills transfer that happened, we were able to underwrite that ticket deal. And right now we're working on another 100 megawatt solar project. And lastly is really about policy and regulatory alignment. We do work closely with the Ministry of Green Economy. The NDA department there has been very supportive. And there are certain laws that have been changed to ensure that the environment is conducive for us to be able to get the finance that is required for transition. And I know I said lastly, but very lastly is the monitoring and ensuring that you have measurability. How does success look like? Are you really ensuring that everything that you committed to is being done? And that's really has been our journey up to this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we learned that although accreditation is a very tedious process, your capacity is built and you build networks and partnership and even new opportunities. So thank you very much, Coral. Okay, now we would move to the Pacific. We had Africa, we had the Caribbean. Let's move to the Pacific. So Ms. Coral, the Pacific region is on the front line of climate change. I mean, you have sea level rise, you have tsunamis, and you have all of the other things happening. As an accredited entity, how is SPC supporting countries to align disaster, risk reduction, environmental protection, and climate finance? Please share some light on accessing climate finance, in particular on your accreditation experience with the Climate Fund, and give us your experience as well on your work with other national entity that wants to access climate finance in the Pacific region.
Thank you so much, and really enjoyed the interventions of my two panelists as well. So I'm going to try and summarize that question and give you some context, right? Because we're all different, very different in our geographies, our cultures, our access to markets. So it's not always easy to apply the same approach. And our region has, 22 countries and territories. 14 of them are independent, Pacific Island SIDS, and the rest are territories of France, the United States, the UK, and others. So, and our organization services all of them, and the metropolitan members who are the metropolitan brothers and sisters of those territories. So we are a technical and scientific organization, and we can't get into the politics in the same way that our political forum, the Pacific Islands Forum, does. So we split those roles between the intergovernmental organizations, and that can be character building. But one of the key things about SPC is we're 78 years old, right? The same age as the United Nations. So we were established as a geopolitical blanket of peace across the Pacific Ocean after the Cold War. So that is the history of where we've come from. So gaining independence, our oldest country is about 60 years old, and our youngest is about 20 years old in self-governing. But we have thousands of years of traditional presence. So we have a strong traditional system of governance, land tenure, and ocean tenure that exists and is a big part of the decision-making of our countries. Our Western systems of law and policy are very young, and those two don't always mix together all that well. So that is a very complex operating environment for our countries, and often it means they are not afforded finance in a way that best suits their own national systems. So going through the accreditation process can be a huge struggle, right? Because there are lots of hoops to go through, and for us, we're an institution of 1,000 staff. We cover every sector from fisheries, oceanic fisheries, coastal fisheries and aquaculture, agriculture and forestry, energy, minerals, health, education, and culture, traditional knowledge, and human rights. So we have a huge capability that we're trying to pull together to service countries that are relatively young. So often we try to bundle our science and programs to deliver at scale, because delivering individual projects can be quite challenging. And so SPC, when we became accredited, we felt a huge pressure to unlock climate finance and pipelines very quickly, because our countries are really not receiving anywhere. I think they're on the lowest access rates, right? 0.33% of the $100 billion promise is what our countries are accessing. But even with 1,000 staff, when we became accredited in 2019, we had 3 people. That's all the readiness funding that we would afford. And that readiness funding wasn't from the GCF, it was from bilateral partners. So we had to go out and get funding to front load the capability of our accredited entity function. So I went to New Zealand and asked them for a significant amount of money and had to give them a business case that if you give me $30 million now, we will bolster our accredited entity function, our project development specialists in the technical divisions, and we will quickly open a pipeline for Pacific countries. And so we were able to get to a $400 million pipeline fairly quickly. But it's not that hard when you've got specialists writing projects to access money. But when you don't take into account the absorption capability on the other side, you run into a very significant problem. So I want to share this because I think this is a lesson learned that the absorption and access are two sides of the same coin. And in the development of project proposals, in the haste to access finance, if you don't build in that absorption capability at the face of change in countries, you immediately take on a huge risk as an accredited entity. Because as Dr. Colin mentioned, if that doesn't flow fast enough, if it's not being absorbed, you have to step in and help move that. And you have to find money to do it because the AE fees don't do that. They don't cover upfront project development costs. They only cover oversight costs. So there are lots and lots of challenges in that journey. So what my advice would really be is, unless you're going to build a significant number of projects, I would not even pursue accreditation. I would just become an executing entity or leave that headache of accredited entity function to someone else. Because as Colin said, unless you have a sufficient number and size of pipeline, you will never reach a cost-neutral balance. So we are only at cost neutrality in theory now after we've built a $400 million pipeline. If I hadn't gone out and got money to bolster capability, it would have taken us 15 years to get to the point where the AE fee is sufficient because your pipeline is big enough. So I know that direct access sounds really great as an AE for a country or a small entity, but I would not touch it with a barge pole unless you are going to have more than 5 or 6 projects that give you sufficient total money to draw enough A fee on to be cost neutral at least. Otherwise, you have to find money from somewhere else always. As an intergovernmental institution, we feel a responsibility to unlock climate finance. So we're willing to go out big for money to provide that capability, but it's definitely not for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you from the Pacific, and we learned that accessing is one, but if you cannot implement, you would have a lot of bottlenecks and problems. And although it's important to access from multilateral funding agency, bilateral support is also very important. So we heard from the accredited entity, and we'll shift to the entity that has aspiration for accreditation. So we'll start with Mr. Victor Maflalela. And you are a disaster risk reduction expert, and climate disasters is frequent, like the cyclone, flash flooding, wildfires, heat waves in Eswatini. How is Eswatini integrating climate risk into its national disaster preparedness system? What lessons can be shared on working across sectors, such as with environmental and finance institutions, to strengthen early warning response and long-term resilience? And also, what has been your experience working with accredited entity to access climate finance?
Thank you very much, moderator. Thanks, my panelists. It's very difficult to speak after you have been scared by the Pacific and the Caribbean on these aspirations which we have as a country. But we would like to appreciate this opportunity for this engagement. Yes, that's true. As a country, Eswatini, we experience quite a number of hazards, from cyclones, floods, heat waves, and droughts being the major issues that we have as a country. And we currently are in a journey of building resilience. On this journey, we have first developed a resilience strategy, and then after we developed a disaster risk financing strategy. And in our mechanism as a country, our finance strategies are held with the Ministry of Finance. So we work collaboratively with a multilateral institution to develop the strategy. But the strategy, we deposit it with the Ministry of Finance as a custodian of that. So we have seen that kind of collaboration works quite well with us as a country. Secondly, we are also investing in our systems and ensuring that we have enough evidence in building our case. So we have climate-informed risk profiling. We have what we call a composite drought index that we have developed with the World Bank. And we also have in a project which we had with the multilateral bank in terms of coming up with the risk profiles of the country. We have developed municipal plans, drought management plans for all the municipalities, so that we are sure in this municipality this is the hazard and how they're going to deal with that. And we have also developed risk profiles for the country for the at national level and going down to sub-national level to say these are the problems and this is how we are going to tackle it. And in this journey, we have also seen the importance of citizen science, which we call indigenous knowledge, in infusing it into our early warning system. So we are building a national early warning system that is informed by satellite data and ground observations from our met stations, and also from the citizens of the country. So we are measuring that on one system that is going to inform us when it comes to drought risk preparedness. So in terms of our early warning, we are working collaboratively with the Meteorology Department and the Environment Ministry to make sure that we provide timely early warning systems to the citizens, including providing advisories to our farmers on projected seasonal forecasts that we have. So this is going to be the situation, and this will be the advice which is in line with when to plant and how to plant. So we find that to be very important. So as the National Disaster Management Agency, on our we have also reviewed our legislation, which is now going to position us better in terms of risk financing. Part of that, it calls for the development of a disaster risk management fund, which we are now going to utilize in terms of financing our different hazards for that. But having said all that, we are not only looking into financing response operations. So we are now saying, using all this evidence, we want to finance resilience, like invest in preparedness, invest in interventions that will work or mitigate these different hazards. So we are shifting the focus now from financing disasters, and then we want to finance resilience interventions for the country. And in this process, it has enabled us to collaborate with the different government ministries and different institutions. And let me just stop there for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and we learned that it's very important, even from the Caribbean perspective, to gather data and store data, because it helps with your climate rationale. And we notice you're big on gathering and I hope storing the data in order to build resilience. So thank you very much for that. And now we're going to invite our last but not least member of our panel, Mr. Isaac Dadla. And the Eswatini Environmental Authority leads the implementation of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, the NBSAP, which is a key policy instrument for conserving biodiversity and integrating ecosystem-based approaches into national development. How is Eswatini embedding nature-based solution and ecosystem-based adaptation into climate strategies? And again, what is your experience working with accredited entities to access climate finance?
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, colleagues, for the exciting submissions. Actually, I think it is fitting that we are gathered here in the Amazonia region, really talking about issues of nature-based solutions. And when I heard the question from the organizers, I thought maybe it is only fitting that we pay tribute to the people of Amazonia and the people in the Congo, back home in Africa, who actually over centuries have held the stewardship of our pristine forests, which I think are at the heart of this whole concept of nature-based solutions. And as you have said, the issue of the NBSAPs are very key in terms of mapping out how nature-based solutions can be a solution. But I think in the context of where we are gathered here at COP30, the question of looking at nature-based solutions through the lens of Article 9.1 is important because we don't want to use it as a smoke screen for obligations to some parties. So I think that discussion is important, and most of my colleagues in the Africa group, this is what we are trying to put to the fore. Now, the context of how nature-based solution can be seen as a solution within of particularly with NPC should also be viewed in the context of the kind of crisis that we're facing as a team. The crisis of droughts and the risk that my colleague Victor has just mentioned here, as well as the issue of livelihoods. Livelihoods, joblessness, particularly amongst young people. All of these things should actually contextualize how we approach nature-based solution. But there are just three key things I want to mention. The first one is that we see nature-based solution as an opportunity, really, as a landing zone for all the three Rio Conventions. It is for this reason that most of our PIPE projects, but by the way, we are a candidate, accredited a direct access entity. We are just busy now with our readiness. We hope maybe within a year we would have achieved the scary accreditation to GCF. So what we are looking at is that we are looking at nature-based solution as one of those landing zone in terms of the synergies between the three Rio Conventions. That's why one of the PIPE projects that we have just completed now is looking at the issue of integrated mountain ecosystems and catchment management as one of our focus areas. It's a project which we think, working with UNEP, we will be able to have delivered even before we are accredited, so that we can actually test our absorption ability in terms of executing. So that's one of the things that we are trying to look at. But we also realize that the issue of data, as we were saying, is important. That's why the issue of what we are discussing here, the global adaptation goals, and the issue of understanding on the biodiversity side, the Montreal Cumin targets, as well as the land degradation neutrality targets on the UNCCD side, becomes a very important nexus for us to look at as we conceptualize and look at these future projects, which we hope to deliver in terms of what we need to do. But as we have said, colleagues, I think what is important again is this issue of collaborations. And for us, we see collaborations as one of the major milestones that we really need to actually build upon. That's why we work with the Disaster Management Agency, we work with the Ministry of Agriculture, we work with the Ministry of Tourism, the Forestry Department, we work with Economic Planning, we work with all partners, Ministry of Agriculture, so that we can be able to collaborate and deliver on some of these issues. But lastly, the issue of nature-based solutions, we look at it through the face of communities. In the past few years, we have actually invested a lot of resources through the Eswatini Environment Fund, assisting communities to intervene through some of these nature-based solutions, whether through land degradation, rehabilitation, wetlands restoration. Such projects we think are key in terms of collaborating with communities if nature-based solution can actually be a solution indeed. Let me just end there for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Isaac. And we learned that collaboration is very important. And I was wondering that we know accreditation is important and it's beneficial, but it's also challenging. So I was wondering how could we as entity work closer together to bridge that financial gap, non-accreditation and accredited entity. Anybody want to take that for 1 minute?
While I'm still hot on the mic, I think we are learning a lot from what is happening from the Pacific and the Caribbeans, really working across countries. I think one of the initiatives that we're trying now, we are trying to mainstream what to call the Great Green Wall initiative in Africa, which has been successfully implemented in the Sahel, in the north. So we're now taking it to the south. So we look at working together not just within the country, but we are also looking at working together in the SADC sub-region so that we can collaborate even across the borders. I think for me that is important going forward.
I know we're running out of time, but very quickly, one of the things the 5Cs has done fairly well is to establish a community of practice in the Caribbean of a network of accredited entities. And so we meet twice a year with all of the aspirational ones and the accredited entities to share lessons and knowledge in terms of, how to, as well as to share resources like gender policies and environmental and social safeguard policies, and the idea to then tweak it to meet your needs, so you don't have to do it alone. Negotiating your AMA or your funding activity agreement, all of these things we do. And so we also have a MOU with SPREP, and SPREP actually came to the 5Cs and spent a week understanding how the 5Cs is set up and how we engage with the GCF. And 5Cs will also now return and go to SPREP in a South-South collaboration with Pacific Island countries and Caribbean countries, again, sharing knowledge and experiences. Because the GCF doesn't have a very, it's not a very transparent interaction. Each accredited entity has a slightly different relationship, and depending on your ability to negotiate various agreements, you may get certain accommodations that other entities may not have. And so if we can share how 5Cs has been able to do some of these things with you as a prospective accredited entity or as an accredited entity, it then prepares you with the information to be able to more effectively engage. We don't have to suffer it alone. We can, you have strengths, we have strengths, you have strengths, and when we bring those together, we can come up with a network that effectively engages with the fund.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, we actually do something similar, but probably not as formal. We go directly to countries and prospective entities who are trying to get there and give them a lowdown on the experience, but also share how they can continue that journey. I think that thing that I would leave with you, and so I would encourage that, right? The Commonwealth Secretariat used to bring all of the SIDS regions' capability together to learn from each other decades ago. They don't do that anymore, and it would be good to start that again, I think. But I think when you look at how much money is in the multilateral funds, which we come here and painfully negotiate all the time and get really disappointed, the capitalization rates of those indicate that there's probably only ever going to be 15 to 20% of the climate finance need coming from those. But we put so much of our capacity and hopes into that. But the rest of the landscape of climate finance is bilateral, it's private sector, it's the MDBs, the innovation, and all of that is part of the thing that we need to stitch together against the absolute national priorities and community priorities, not the other way around. We can't have communities and countries doing financial gymnastics through all of those things because they just don't have the capability and capacity to weather that. We have to somehow create the vehicles that we can bring those different resources to meet countries where they're at. And we've got a number of innovative vehicles that we're doing in the region at country level, but at the Pacific region as well to try and do that. The only thing that stops us from doing that well is that if we don't do our own benchmarks of what success looks like in delivering on, as you said, the key indicators and the composite goals of all of those conventions. If you can bring them down to your own level, there's no excuse that the GCF can't put that funding straight into your national system or your national fund. The same with bilaterals. And then you have a vehicle to mosaic that type of investment with one report at the end of the year that delivers on all of those different sources. And we're doing that at the moment in my country because we have been so frustrated with how hard it is to access the multilaterals. And I think these are the homegrown solutions in developing countries that we need to share with each other and figure out the other solutions and not just rely on these big funds, because that is only ever going to be a portion of the solution.
Oh, thank you very much. I think for me, key take home is that you exchange visits to share knowledge and experience is important. And you just don't rely on the multinational fund, but you need to build a network of funding as well, including national and bilateral. So thank you very much. It was a really fruitful discussion. So thank you, panel. You could now have your seat, and I just would invite my colleague, Dr. O'Neill Yala, to close us with some remarks. Wait, let's do it after. Let's do it after.
Let's appreciate our, panel of speakers, for sharing very practical and, to me, I find it very deeply impactful experience from Africa, from the Caribbean, from the Pacific. And I think I will just say that your reflection have not only illuminated the challenges we face, but also have charted a clear pathway that we can be able to follow towards building a greater resilience and inclusive climate finance. Maybe I will just say one of the summary of what I can say is that today's dialogue have reinforced the fundamental truth. And what is that truth? That climate resilience is not built in silos. So it emerges from an intentional integration of this intentional plan, environmental governance, financial innovation, community-centered solutions. And we have seen from the experience from Eswatini how they are trying to mainstream ecosystem-based adaptation. We've seen how this, the 5 Cs are also being a regional coordination, how they are integrating regional coordination. And from the SPC also, we have had the leadership they are providing in terms of building science-based approaches. And I think we have very strong, models that we can be able to look into and we can learn from. So also, I think one of the things I will say is that accreditation is not just enough, as we have seen. So what matters most is what happens after the approval. So the speed at which an institutions can become operational, the support they receive in proposal development, fiduciary compliance, as we have heard from Mr. Young, and the monitoring. What we need to possibly do is to continue to advocate for more simplified procedures that will be able to enhance technical assistance and more flexible funding windows that may reduce the time lag and enable faster deployment of resources where they are more needed. So the core benefit of integrated climate action, I can say that the recurring theme today was that we need to have information, we need data, revitalized ecosystem, inclusive financing that will be able to empower the local communities that we are serving. So what will be the way forward? First, I think, and we've had that, we need to deepen the South-South cooperation, the triangular cooperation, regional centers like the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, the SPC, the 5 Cs. We are already providing invaluable knowledge exchange, peer learning, and technical support, but we need to strengthen that. We need to strengthen that collaboration and make it much stronger and more robust. Second, also that finance must be localized and democratized. So national institutions, development bank, environmental authorities, like we've seen for Eswatini, disaster management agencies, must be at the center of climate finance decision making. Third, we need harmonization, not duplication. So as countries, we need to implement it as we move towards implementing our NDCs and NAP, biodiversity strategies. There is immense opportunity for us to align our reporting, streamline requirements, and leverage synergies across the global agenda. So donor and fund managers have a critical role to play in supporting the convergence. And finally, let us center more in equity, on terms of equity. And that means when we source these finances, we should be able to make sure that we put the women, the youth, possibly in some places, the indigenous communities or the vulnerable community who bear the brunt of climate impacts. Because often these people, we know they are excluded from the decision-making table. So inclusive governance is not optional. It is an essential impact. So in closing the theme of this section, from resilience to risk to resilience is not a we can see that risk to resilience is not a destination, but it's a continuous journey, one that demands courage, collaboration, and commitment. So I believe, and it's my hope, that this meeting will be a catalyst to build our partnership, bring accelerated action and shared vision of a just, resilient, and sustainable future for all. I will also want us to use this time to thank the Congo Basin Commission, the Commonwealth Secretariat, and all the participating institutions in making this dialogue possible. Let's carry these lessons forward together. I will want to conclude, we are doing this in an Congo Basin pavilion. Let me end up with this statement, or with this proverb, an African proverb. It said, every day the sun comes out. And I think this is very relevant in the context of our different nations, those who have gotten accredited and those who haven't, and those who are in the process going forward. It said, every day the sun comes out in the African savannah. What the lion thinks for it to survive is for it to run faster than the slowest moving antelope or gazelle. And for the gazelle, what it thinks on its own for it to survive when the sun comes up is to run faster than the fastest moving lion. So maybe in conclusion, I will say, whether you are a gazelle, whether you've gotten accredited, or whether you are a lion, once the sun comes up, you better be running. So let's all be running, and let's try to be able to be agents of change for our own countries, to be able to bring in the needed resources that will be able to build resilience and reduce the risk. Thank you very much. I'll stop here. So let's come for the picture.
Okay, let's all come back for a quick picture. Thank you.